Hey guys, I'm Matt. I'm the service manager here at Princess Craft RV. We just wanted to take a minute and kind of go over some real world scenarios in this MDC. We've shot a video with Renogy that is available on MDC's website that goes over a lot of the features, benefits, functionality, and all the stuff with the Renogy products inside. What we're going to do today is kind of go through what to expect, how to use it, kind of what to understand it basically. So come on, let's get inside. Hey guys, like we said outside, Renogy, the video we did with them, does go through a lot of the features, benefits, setup, and product locations and orientation of all the Renogy products inside this MDC. Again, what we're going to be going through today is just kind of how to use it, what to expect, what your limits may be, just so you can kind of have a better understanding of real world scenarios so that you're not caught off guard off-grid somewhere with a dead battery or not being able to use certain components of the RV. So down underneath the bench here, you'll see you have your two big batteries. These again are 400 amp hour batteries each, which gives you a total of 800 amp hours of battery capacity. So the best thing to kind of keep in mind on that is your batteries are like your gas tank. So in your car, you know, you have your gas tank. You're gonna have something that'll kind of tell you your average mile per gallon, distance to empty, all that stuff. But there is no perfect scenario out there to tell you exactly how long your batteries are going to last, because it's all dependent on how much load you put on there, what you're using. Some parts of the day you may be able to charge a little more, you may be drawing more than you can charge. So we're going to kind of go through what to look for, how to read all this stuff, also just some kind of basic math of what to use, just to kind of keep in the back of your mind so that you can keep a better understanding of how much you're consuming on the batteries themselves. So cool, let's just jump right in. So again, on the batteries, to be able to turn them on or off, you do have the button on the top here. The main disconnect is going to be back here. So one thing you want to look for is if you ever lose power, you're not getting any power to your 12 volt items, which would be like your lights, your fans, pretty much anything that you see on and running currently, because right now we are running just off of the batteries. What we'll do is you'll have just a visual of them. If you see the blue lights up here are lighting up at any number of these 4 lights, then that means that your battery is on, it's doing what it's supposed to do. If you have any other issues with the other lights over here, you'll have a battery status light, which is right next to that silver power button. It'll be blinking a different color if there is a problem. The other thing is lithium batteries, for those of y'all who are not familiar with how lithium operates, they have a BMS built into them. So you can't, it's like your cell phone, right? So your cell phone has a lithium battery in it. If it dies, it's off. It doesn't just sit there with a little bit of voltage. It works, and then boom, gone. So if you ever get a scenario where you don't have any power, these lights are not coming on, the button, it's showing that it's completely dead, then it may have just drained the battery to a point of discharge. So lithiums can come back online. There's a couple of different ways you can do that. One of the most convenient ways is without turning any loads on or anything else, just having your battery disconnect in the on position so that we can get charge back into it. We will try to either run the DC to DC charger up front, which is the little connector that's separate from your 7-way, which will be able to go through this DC to DC charger here, which will be able to provide a little bit more of some juice to the battery to kind of shock it back to life, kind of wake it up. If you get to that point, then now you should start getting some status lights here. If you can get to be able to a point where you can plug it in, then obviously your inverter charger that's under the bed over there, it's going to be the biggest bang for your buck to be able to charge. Otherwise, you got solar on the roof, the DC to DC charger, plug back your vehicle up to it, plug it into that DC to DC charger, just let the truck sit there and idle for a little while. Then you'll be able to see kind of on the one core over here what is actually going on. Excuse me, so that you'll be able to see that it's actually charging. You'll also start to see the blue lights will start kind of blinking as you're taking a charge, so it'll also tell you on the battery itself. So there's a ton of different places in the Renogy setup to be able to see and make sure that you're actually got power. So again, if you ever have any issues on the batteries, the one that's under the bench closest to the bathroom is a little bit easier to see all the different indicator lights, what they mean. and they'll tell you right there on the battery what's going on. So pretty straightforward, pretty awesome, pretty easy to use. So the one big thing to keep in mind anytime you're dry camping. So when you're dry camping, you are just running off of the batteries in this scenario. You can use generators, other stuff, but dry camping is just the concept of not being able to be plugged into an external power supply, like a shore power, the grid power, hence the name off-grid. So when you're running off-grid with this setup, with a lithium and the inverter, you are running off of the batteries. So the inverter is what's taking that battery power and inverting it over to alternating current, which is going to run things like your air conditioner. It'll also run the outlets similar to what you would have in your house, which will be kind of scattered throughout the RV. But that's your alternating current power is what you would have in your house. So the inverter is taking that DC power and changing all that and creating the AC power that you would need. Now, that process for just the inverter to be able to do the inversion process does take a little bit of juice out of the batteries. The other thing is you start running heavier loads like an air conditioner, any bigger appliances, a hair dryer, coffee maker, anything like that, that's going to start pulling on that inverter as well. So now that inverter is pulling even more juice out of your batteries. So one of the big things, big key takeaways to keep in mind as you're dry camping is your consumption. So there is what's called Watt's law, which is your wattage divided by your voltage equals how much amperage you're going to be drawing. Now it gets a little convoluted, a little complicated because of the inverter. It's AC wattage dropping down to DC. But the great thing is Rego with the one core does all the math for you. But it is still a good idea to kind of familiarize yourself with that Watt's law, just so you have an idea of, hey, this air conditioner, if it's a 2000 watt air conditioner, you're going to divide that by the voltage, which would be 120. So it would net you around 10 to 15 amps that it would be drawing. That's rough math. Don't quote me on that. But it's just something good to keep in mind. So any of your appliances that you're going to be using, whether it's a coffee maker, a hair dryer, straightener, whatever it may be, is going to tell you on it somewhere what the wattage is. So if you were to take that wattage and divide it by that 120 volts, because anything you're plugging into your AC outlets is going to be 120 volts. Now give or take 10% or so, but 120 volts is your baseline. So whatever the wattage says on that appliance that you're trying to use, you would divide it by that voltage, which would be 120 in that scenario, and that'll get you your amperage of how much amperage you're pulling out of that inverter. Now, that's also going to work for shore power. It's the same concept. You know, with shore power, you're limited to 30 amps of supply. So just doing the math, just basic RV math is, you know, your air conditioner can pull 10 to 15, 18 to 20 sometimes if it's spiking and the compressor is having to work really hard. That's a decent amount of wattage, and that alone is just going to take up about half of that availability for shore power. So very good things to keep in mind, regardless of whether you're off-grid or just regular camping at an RV park plugged into 30 amp service. So as we're doing all that, again, the Rego One Core does an excellent job of taking all that information and doing the math for you. So you don't have to sit here and try to write it down or bust out your old calculator and try to get some numbers going. They take all the math into account. They figure out how much power you're drawing, how much battery bank you have, and they give you a time, a basically distance to empty, right? Like on your gas tank. So the time remaining right now, as we're sitting, we have 54% charge out of the batteries, which is going to net us about a little over 400 amp hours of battery bank, because we got, again, two 400 amp hour batteries, which would be a total of 800. So right now we're pulling about 12 amps, which is going to tell us that we have 33 hours, kind of bouncing around between 33, 49 hours of use, just the way we're using it right now. So again, keeping that math in mind, going back to elementary school with just basic math, we're going to look at how much amperage we're drawing. Okay, cool. I'm sitting here right now. I'm comfortable the way I'm sitting. I've got 8 amps that I'm drawing. This thing says I have 50 hours, right? But as you start turning things on, so if we turn on the air conditioner, obviously that inverter is going to start drawing a lot more power, and that number of how much amperage we're drawing is going to start climbing up. So as that number of the amperage draw climbs up, the amount of time that we have starts to drop, right? Basic math again. So right now, compressor, the AC kicking on, We are slowly creeping up here with the inverter draw. We're sitting at 87 amps that we're pulling off of the batteries now. About 85.9, 86. So it looks like we're kind of leveling off right now at about 86. Now we're in the morning time. It's not 100 degrees outside. We've got the AC running. It's, you know, trying to cool down to about 72 degrees, but this morning when we came in, it was about 77, 78 degrees. So obviously right now the air conditioner is not working as hard, but it is still drawing a good amount of power. So we've got 87 amps, 88 amps is where it's kind of leveled off with the air conditioner running that we're pulling from your batteries. Now, I've seen these get anywhere up to 100, 120 amps when the air conditioner is turned on that you're drawing from the batteries. So again, just basic math, without looking up there, if you're pulling 100 amps, you've got 800 amp hours of battery on a fully charged battery bank. In that scenario, you would have 8 hours of runtime before you would have to recharge. Now, that's fully discharged, but we always want to bank on a little bit of leeway, like looking at your cell phone and seeing that you have 10%. You're like, oh, I need to go charge it. Same concept, right? So now we're sitting at 91 amps that we're pulling. It's showing 4 hours of runtime. Now, this Rego 1 core takes into account all factors going into the battery. So it's going to take in how much we're drawing for amperage for consumption, but it's also going to take in what the solar is putting in on the roof, or if you have the vehicle plugged in, what the DC to DC charger is putting in as well. So you don't have to sit here and try to pinpoint each thing and be like, okay, this one's putting out 9 amps, this one's taking 90 amps. This thing does all the math for you, which is awesome. So even though you have multiple components, real world use, just daily use out in the wild camping, this 1 core right here is going to be your main hub, like your dashboard instrument panel to tell you what is going on with your battery and your power system. So if y'all want to come over here and take a look, we will show you what's going on. So now, as you can see over here, we've got the 1 core on. So in the MDC, even though we have the disconnect down below and the 2 buttons on the battery to be able to shut the batteries off, you still have another disconnect up here, which is going to be the main power to everything that sits on this control panel up top here. And you'll see the Renogy screen has its own switch. So the screen up here, components may still work, but this screen is not going to be on unless you have this disconnect on and this switch on to say Renogy screen. Now, once you get that turned on, you'll see kind of your main home screen over here, kind of your dashboard of what all is going on. You'll see we got our battery bank here that's showing 54%. Our time remaining is 4 hours. Right now we are pulling with a down arrow and a negative symbol. We are drawing, consuming, whatever word, verbiage you want to use, 95.8 amps with the air conditioner running. So that is your kind of bullet pointed overview of what is happening with the battery and the power system. But you can also scroll through if you want to see what each individual component is doing. You can scroll through at the bottom and scroll over to the DC to DC charger, which is going to show you some solar power. Right now it shows that we're charging at about 3 amps of solar. Again, we're early in the morning, cloud cover. We're still getting some juice out of that solar. Now, with the solar on this thing, it is split into 2 banks. So even though you have one massive array of solar up top, it's split to 2 different controllers. So on that video with Renogy, they discuss how you'll have 3 of the panels are running through the DC to DC charger, and then the other 4 panels on the roof, which makes a total of 7 panels that you got up there. The other 4 are going to go through its own solar controller as well. So you have 2 different ways to see on the 1 core what your solar is doing, because you've got 2 different banks of solar essentially on the roof of this one. So you'll be able to see all that. You'll be able to scroll through what the battery is doing, the battery percentage, how much amperage is being drawn from it. Same thing with the inverter. Now we're back into that wattage. The inverter is going to display wattage, but your batteries are going to display amperage. Again, going back to that Watt's law, taking your wattage divided by amperage works to help kind of keep that in the back of your mind of what power you're drawing. Now, it does get a little convoluted between AC power with the inverter, with amperage, how it gets dropped down to DC, but again, the 1 core does it all for you. So You can also swipe over to what the solar controller is doing, and that shows that we're charging at 2.4 amps. So we are 5.8 amps of solar charge right now, early in the morning, very little sun, massive cloud cover this morning. But overall we're drawing 97 amps with an air conditioner running. So that's pretty dang good for a unit this size. And you still got 4 hours off of a half charged battery bank. So if it was fully charged, we would be closer to that 7-8 hour runtime that you'd have for the air conditioner. Now, the one thing I always want to caution people is just because it says that you can run to 5 hours, maybe set an alarm, set a reminder, something to be like, okay, I need to come back and check it in like 2 or 3 hours. Don't just say, man, it said I had 5 hours to go and I came and checked it at 5 hours and everything was dead. Just like in your car, again, we're using the car analogy because it's easy to relate. Gas tank, distance to empty. If it tells you you got 40 miles, doesn't mean you drive 40 miles to find a gas station, right? So it says 5 hours, you're gonna run 3 hours, maybe find another way to recharge. Now with this setup, if you don't have a way to plug it into shore power, back the truck up to it, hook it up to that DC to DC charger, come in here, verify that it's working. You'll see the DC to DC amperage coming up on the one core at the bottom. Then just let the truck sit there and idle for a little while. Let it run. Drive it around the block if you want to, but that DC to DC charger has a maximum charge rate of 50 amps. So going back into this amperage thing, you've got 800 amp hours of battery. If your battery bank was completely dead and you had to recharge it up to just off of the DC to DC charger, you would just do the math. 800 divided by 50, which is what? 40 hours. So I wouldn't fully charge in a day, but if you go to your inverter can charge at a higher rate when you plug into shore power. Also, if you had massive amounts of solar and the sun was just beating down on you like crazy, that solar is going to be able to charge at a maximum of 60 amps. Now, that's always going to change. It's never going to be consistent. The way the solar panels work on these is it's based off of the need. So as you're going back to recharge, you'll have 3 different states of charge. You've got bulk, you've got absorption, and you've got float. So bulk is the first one, a whole bunch, like Costco, right? Bulk charge. Absorption is going to be kind of in the middle to kind of level it off. Float is going to be right at the end, just kind of sitting there floating, right? So very little amperage. So as you go through each one of these, you can start to read and see what state of charge it says it's in. And if it's showing a float charge, then you know you're pretty close to being full. And if the percentage is reading off and reading up to 98%, again, you know you're getting close to being full. But if you see anything that doesn't register right, then then you can see for sure whether there's an issue or not. We get a lot of people that are just kind of not as familiar with how this stuff works. So just because it says something doesn't necessarily mean that there is a problem. It goes back to just kind of getting an understanding of what is going on, what you're seeing, what each product is doing individually, because they're all communicating together to come up here and tell you the one information on the one core that you need. So again, just familiarizing yourself with the equipment. One thing I always recommend to anybody with any RV, it doesn't matter, but especially something that is set up so extreme off-grid setup, is go take it out for a couple of test runs before you bank on a massively long trip. Don't go the day you buy it, go run on a 2-week-long trip across the country, because you may not know the limitations of it yet. So go set it up outside your house, go set it up at an RV park or a campground real close to your house, so that you can kind of test it out and see where those limitations are based off of how you want to use it, and then find out ways you can adjust your usage to accommodate longer run times, more use, a full day's worth of use. But I will tell you one thing to always keep in mind with these types of setups: your solar only charges during the day, right? So as much as you can keep it charging during the day, not using as much power, use the daylight coming through, don't have the lights on, use very little consumption throughout the day, because the most that you're going to want to use the power is at night, right? When you're coming in, you're going to bed, you want to be able to run the AC for a little while to cool it down. So if you've been sitting here all day trying to pull all this juice out of the batteries, now you're limited to how you can recharge it throughout the night. So reserve during the day, very, very conservative with your usage during the day, and then before you get closer to nighttime, you can come in, and start using some things and start jumping up that usage. So hopefully that answered a bunch of questions. Maybe it created some questions that you didn't know you had. But again, we're always here if you need help. My name is Matt, service manager here at Princess Craft RV. So hit us up.